My name is Abby Ramanan. I'm a project director with Clean Energy Group. We're a national nonprofit that works to advance a clean energy transition for all. And we are a member of the WEAC TCTAC for Region 2, along with my colleagues at all of these organizations you can see on the screen. So next slide, please. Before we get into any content, I did want to just go over some quick meeting logistics. Number one, this meeting is being recorded. All of you will have gotten that little notification, and we will be sending around the recording of this training and presenters' slides to all of you after the training. So I know that's going to be top of mind for all of you, and our presenters are going to be sharing a lot of information. So don't worry, you will be getting the recording and their slides after this. So don't worry about that. We are in just a standard Zoom format, which means all of you do have the ability to unmute yourselves. We ask that you please don't do that. Make sure that you are muted while our presenters are speaking. If you have a question, you're welcome to drop it into the chat, either while our presenters are speaking, or we will have a Q&A session. We're hoping to have at least 25 minutes of this hour dedicated to Q&A. So please drop your questions throughout this training into the chat. And once we get to that Q&A section, we'll be asking questions from the chat, but also we will invite you at that time. Will have the ability to raise your hand using the, if you go to the reactions button on the bottom of your Zoom screen and click raise hand, we'll be able to call on you, and then you can also come off mute and just ask your question verbally. And if we don't get to your question at the session, don't worry, we are recording all of these questions and we'll make sure to follow up with you afterwards to get your question answered. So next slide. So what is the TCTAC? For those of you who are maybe not familiar with this acronym, I always think of the little candies, which is why I had to include this picture here. But we are not just a refreshing tiny candy. We are the TCTACs are the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. Very long, which is why we have that acronym. But this is a program that was created by EPA and DOE, who awarded 16 centers around the country with the goal of supporting communities and their partners in accessing federal, state, and private resources, as well as engaging in decision-making processes that impact them. So this training is part of the services that are offered by the Region 2 WEAC TCTAC, which serves New York and New Jersey. If you are not from either of those states, just know that this content will be geared to those states. But you're obviously welcome to join us and sit in on the training. But if you have more of a specific technical assistance question, I would encourage you to go to the link that is on this slide, and you can find the TCTAC that would serve your state or community. Next slide. All right, so this training is Community Solar Models and Resources to Benefit Your Community. And this is your training team. My name is Abby Ramanan. I'm a project director with Clean Energy Group, which is a partner with several other organizations in the Region 2 TCTAC. Also facilitating things behind the scenes, we have Sarah and Jordana from WEAC. And you'll see them kind of in the chat and answering questions throughout. And if you have specific questions that are more about the TCTAC, the Region 2 TCTAC more generally, I encourage you to reach out to either of them. And then we have our two presenters today. First up will be Matt Olaf. Matt is a project manager for social equity for the Clean Energy States Alliance, which is a sister nonprofit of Clean Energy Group, which is why you may notice that our logos are very similar. They're two separate organizations, but we are sister nonprofits. But in his role at CISA, he supports the Solar with Justice project, the Scaling Up Solar for Under-Resourced Communities project, and the National Community Solar Partnership for CISA. And then we have Simon Sandler. Simon is a research analyst with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. He joined NREL in 2023 to support the National Community Solar Partnership and provide decision support using NREL's re-upped model. So I am going to stop talking now and turn it over to both of them to share a ton of awesome information and resources that they have for you today. So I will hand it over to Matt. And just, again, drop your questions in the chat. We will get to as many of them as we can.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Abby. Thanks everybody for joining today. So yeah, I'm going to do a kind of a high-level overview of community solar and then talk about the most common community solar models. Next slide, please. So Abby mentioned it a little bit, but Clean Energy States Alliance, we're a sister organization of the Clean Energy Group, but we're a national nonprofit coalition working with state energy agencies to advance clean energy. So we have a number of member organizations that are state energy agencies that are working on the most innovative clean energy initiatives across the country. So next slide, please. And these are just logos of our member organizations across the country. So not all state energy agency is a member of CESA, but we do work with these organizations, these agencies, as well as other states across the country. Next slide, please. So Abby mentioned some of the projects that I work on. Again, I'm a project manager for solar equity for CESA. I work on the Solar with Justice project, which is a project where we identify best practices and challenges for collaboration between community-based organizations and state energy agencies on deploying solar for LMI and marginalized communities. So how can community-based organizations and state energy agencies work together to advance equitable solar? And then also work on the National Community Solar Partnership with Simon, and he'll talk more about that after I'm done with my presentation. Here's a slide, a project we've been working on, or a piece of our work for the past year is supporting states around accessing funding and program support through the Inflation Reduction Act. So some of the examples of how we work with states are technical assistance, convene meetings to discuss best practices, provide comments and analysis, and provide information, write reports on ways to access funding through the Inflation Reduction Act, and a lot of incentives around solar. So next slide, please. So now I'll dig into community solar, overview of community solar and specific models. Next slide, please. So here are definitions from the U.S. Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency. As you can see, DOE's definition is slightly broader and a little bit more vague, stating that community solar is any project or purchasing program within a geographic area in which the benefits of solar project flow through multiple customers, whereas EPA's definition is a solar PV power producing facility or solar energy purchasing program with up to 5 megawatt nameplate capacity and delivers at least 50% of the power generated from the system to multiple residential customers within the same utility or as the facility. So as you can see, this is a slightly more specific definition than DOE's. And then as you can see at the bottom, state definitions may also vary from these. Next slide, please. So to provide an overview of the landscape of the country, states across the country, this is what community solar looks like. This webinar today is focused on New York and New Jersey, but you can see the states with just orange are states that have at least one community solar program or project. States with the yellow stripes through them have community solar enabling legislation, and then the states with the red dots and yellow lines have community solar enabling legislation, as well as low and moderate income policies associated with those. So a state doesn't necessarily have to have enabling legislation to have community solar programs or projects. In these cases where it's just orange states, those are usually utility-led community solar programs or projects, whether that be a municipal utility, a rural electric co-op, and in some cases, investor-owned utilities that develop their own community solar projects. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to get into the three basic models of community solar: the subscription model, the ownership model, and the energy assistance model. The subscription model is the most common of these, and there is a lot of overlap with the ownership model and the energy assistance model. With the subscription model, kind of think of it as the subscription model being kind of the umbrella model, and then the ownership and energy assistance models being underneath that. But the ownership model isn't necessarily a subscription model. So I'll dig into these a little bit more now. So next slide, please. So for the subscription model, just very generally, it's a system that's owned by generally a utility or a third party. And then there are subscribers, hence the name subscription models, subscribers to these systems. And then the subscriber typically pays for that subscription on their utility bill, which is called consolidated billing, or is billed separately between the utility and the subscription provider. Next slide, please. So there's different ways that the energy can be valued. You can see listed here. And then another question is whether or not the benefits or the subscription is being deployed to LMI communities. So not all community solar subscription arrays are deployed to LMI residents. Usually that requires some additional incentives. So next slide, please. Now we'll get into the ownership model, and there's two different kinds of ownership models that we've identified. The offsite panel model, where this is not on the building, whether it be a multi-family building, the panels are not on the residence where the people are benefiting from the arrays. So offsite panel model, but generally speaking, is owned by the utility customer. These, generally speaking, are community solar arrays that are developed by publicly owned utilities. So this is a question about what ownership means, whether if it is a publicly owned utility like a municipal utility or a rural electric cooperative, that the people in that utility that are subscribing are generally speaking owners of that utility. So they're owners of the array, and they're also benefiting from the community solar model because they're subscribing to the panels. So next slide, please. And then the next model is a cooperative model. This can be where the solar array is at the location where it's being used. So it could be a multifamily building where panels are at the top of the building. And then if it's, let's say, for instance, if it's a cooperative housing association, the residents there could be owning those solar panels and benefiting from it. So there are different models of this in New York City. There are low-income cooperative housing where there are solar arrays that are owned by that dwelling, that building, and those residents are owning those panels and also seeing cost savings as a result. So next slide, please. So this is just kind of covering what I've already mentioned is what ownership means. So you see that third bullet point is a POU, a form of ownership, is a publicly owned utility, a form of ownership. And then also the cooperative model where those subscribers are owners of those of the panels. So why encourage ownership in LMI solar programs? There's wealth building aspects to it, and that the community is involved in owning and maintaining those panels. There's definitely some barriers. The upfront costs of acquiring the panels, if it is a cooperative model, that can be a barrier to obtain for LMI communities. All right, next slide, please. Oh, next slide, sorry, I just covered this one. And then the final model is the energy assistance model. So this is being developed in a few states across the country. It's becoming a little bit more common or popular. So how it works is, generally speaking, a community action agency, which administers programs like LIHEAP and the Weatherization Assistance Program, that they are connecting recipients of those programs, customers of those programs, to community solar projects. So it's identifying those folks who are receiving these benefits already, and then connecting them to community solar projects. So one interesting benefit is, for instance, let's say it's, if a community action agency is doing energy efficiency upgrades or weatherization for one of their recipients, those upgrades can be done. So those savings can be met, and then also they can be connected with a community solar project to see additional energy savings. All right, next slide, please. And this can be done in two ways, where the community action agency is just connecting recipients to the community solar projects and developers, or the community action agency can have kind of a heavier hand and can be much more involved in maybe purchasing the panels, or working directly with the utility to supply those benefits. Next slide, please. So a lot of this information that I presented is in this report that's on this slide right here. If you want to dig in more to this information, check out that report. We also, CISA, we've developed LMI Community Solar Resource Database with dozens of different reports and resources on best practices and identifying challenges around LMI community solar. So I think that's all for me, and I will pass it off to Simon.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. And hello, everyone. I'm Simon Sandler. As said earlier, I'm an engineer and a research analyst at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And I'm going to talk a bit about the National Community Solar Partnership, which is a product of the Solar Energy Technologies Office from the Department of Energy. And Matt and myself both work on NCSP. So if we go to the next slide, I'll give you a quick overview of what NCSP is. NCSP is quite a large program. It does a host of different things, including data tracking, trying to collaborate, community members, and then also provide technical assistance to all of those community members. So I'm going to speak a little later to the Sharing the Sun data set, which is a data tracking thing we do each year here at NREL and for NCSP. And then I'm also going to talk about some of the opportunities for folks within New York, New Jersey, and across the country, actually, to get involved and to learn more about community solar, as well as to take advantage of our technical assistance program, where you can find those types of resources. So if we go to the next slide, just to give you a thought here, we have over 1,500 partners made up of 1,000 organizations representing all 50 states, as well as some of the 6 territories of the US as well. And as you can see here, it's a very broad spectrum of folks, everything from government entities to utilities to for-profit and nonprofit members. And so we really love working with all different types of groups, and you'll hear me refer to some of these groups here, and also suggest that you join NCSP if you're not already a member, to take advantage of and connect with many of these great partners across the country. Next slide. So real quick, DOE and NCSP set a target of reaching 5 million households and providing $1 billion in energy savings by 2025. And so that's one of our goals of NCSP. I just wanted to point that out. But that's just a goal we've set, and it's a thing we're working actively towards right now. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to spend a minute or two here talking about meaningful benefits. And this is something that came out of the Justice 40 initiative of the Biden-Harris administration. And a number of federal programs were tasked with incorporating Justice 40 goals into their programs, and NCSP was absolutely one of them. And so what we have here are the 5 meaningful benefits that NCSP tries to promote and support that community solar projects and programs incorporate. And so that's greater household savings, providing access to low to moderate income households themselves, community solar that is resilient and provides grid benefits. And then you just heard Matt talk about community ownership, so that it's not just a subscription, but also a potential for the owners by the community. And then finally, helping support a very equitable workforce group and entrepreneurship within community solar. So these are 5 kind of underlying goals here, and I'll come back to these a little bit later. But I just wanted to point out that this is part of what we think means meaningful community solar. It's not just community solar, but it's community solar that incorporates these components. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to spend a little bit of time here. This is meant to be the 5 different pathways that we provide support through the National Community Solar Partnership. So one of those ways is education and outreach. We're always providing work just like this, where we try and work with and network with the community to provide information and access to knowledge about community solar. One of the ways we do that is through the Sunny Awards. Through the past 2 years, we have done awards which have highlighted and gave prizes to folks who have done meaningful community solar work, both at the state level and at the local level. And that has included money, prizes for those folks who are doing that and promoting the meaningful benefits through community solar, to try and to provide examples of how other folks can deploy community solar as well. We are also developing 2 software tools that are currently being rolled out. One is the Low Income Clean Energy Connector, which is meant to work with state energy offices and energy efficiency agencies like LIHEAP and connect them with community solar subscribers. And so I'm not going to spend much time on that, since I know many of the folks on this call aren't actually state energy office agencies, but it is a tool that we're working with developing. And then the Community Power Accelerator, which is amongst multiple things, it is one thing, which is that it's a platform that we're developing to bring together developers, philanthropic organizations, investors, and all different types of folks who are trying to develop community solar with meaningful benefits. And so if you're looking to get into developing community solar, if you're looking to finance projects that are providing meaningful benefits in community solar, if you're just a local organization that wants to support projects in your community, joining the Community Power Accelerator is one way to do that and to try and find and promote projects. And that provides access to capital for folks and for projects. And then state engagement is the state's collaborative. I won't spend much time on that, but we work directly with state energy offices to provide them the support we need. And then, as I mentioned, we have direct technical assistance, and that's at no cost. It's open, it's rolling, it's open all the time. And you can apply online once you join NCSP's online platform. And we can provide you or other community members, agencies with the support they need to learn, and or provide you with direction to the right resources that might be helpful in answering the questions you have. All right, next slide, please. So I mentioned we have this TA, and so that's like I said, it's no cost and it's on demand. And so this is just a slide to kind of give you an idea of some of the different types of TA we do. It can cover a whole host of things, everything from designing a project or a program, financial analysis, if you need help doing outreach, or working on policy even potentially. If I go to the next slide, I have a few examples of some TA we've done. And if you go to the website that's linked here on the bottom right, afterwards, when the slides are sent around, you'll see some examples of the types of TA we've done. So I encourage you to go onto the DOE website here and see some examples if you're interested in TA or want to learn more about the types of TA we do. And we're always adding new examples of the TA we've done onto this webpage. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. I want to point out one relatively new thing. Just at the beginning of last month and closing this Friday on December 8th, the Department of Energy announced that they were providing funding to national nonprofit and organizations that are working on the meaningful benefits effectively. These 5 categories on the left side of the screen here, to try and develop best practices and gather information and then help disseminate that information so that folks can deploy community solar. So whether you want to apply in the next few days, I know that's short term, or you're just interested in learning more about this funding and how we're going to be developing and helping implement the best practices around community solar, I want you all to be aware of this because it might be something you want to be involved in, giving input on, or learning from yourself. So The link at the bottom is where the application is, and it gives more information. And then early in the new year, probably in January or February, they will be announcing who the winners are in terms of receiving funding to do this. And then throughout 2024, they will be deploying this program and working to compile best practices. All right, next slide, please. Okay, and then in the meantime, we did pull together some examples already. The Department of Energy's website there's some examples similar to the Sunny Awards, which highlights some of those best practices that we know to date by 3 examples of how to deploy community solar with meaningful benefits. So if you want more knowledge about what that means, how to deploy community solar, you want examples to look to, it's a great place to look for kind of some peer sharing and to learn more about what's been done elsewhere in the country, as well as potentially in New York and New Jersey. All right, next slide. So I'm going to throw this up here. Community solar means a lot of things. This is some proven practices we've seen through NCSP. It is not necessarily what your program or project will do if you're working on it, but we like to point out some great ways to make community solar more accessible to everyone. And so an example of proven practices, we like to have no upfront fees if possible to try and limit barriers to folks getting into it. We want there to be access, like we said, to LMI customers. Consolidated billing, as Matt mentioned a little bit earlier, is a way to make it more easy to message for consumers to understand their bills and how much they're saving. And we'd love to see 20% bill savings, as well as ongoing outreach and communication. So if we go to the next slide, this is just some resources for you to click on. And so you guys will click on these later, but it's really links to a lot of the stuff I just presented. And so I want to spend just a couple minutes now, if we go to the next slide, talking about New York and New Jersey specifically, so that if you have very little background or are new to community solar in your region, you're going to get a quick idea of what is existing in the state. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. Like Abby said, you'll have access to these. But if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to run through what policy looks like. So Matt already showed this. There's policy in many states, and in more than just the states that have enabling policy, there are also community solar projects. So this map looks slightly different than Matt's map earlier. And this is just about the policies that are in states, not projects that have been developed. But if we go to the next slide, what you'll see is that New York and New Jersey both have community solar legislation, and they have programs at the state level. So New York has kind of 2 programs. It's called the New York Sun program, which allows anyone to participate. And then they have a subset of that. It's called Solar for All, which allows and is targeted specifically to low income and moderate income households that may qualify. And the Solar for All provides no cost subscriptions so that the consumer doesn't have to actually pay to be a member. And so they're slightly different versions of each other. Links there that you can go and look and learn a little more about those. Program that was previously a pilot program is now a full-blown, it was just passed, and they're still in the process of refining some components, but there's now a full-blown community solar program in the state called Community Solar Energy Program, or CESP. And they're currently in the project of developing that program out and fleshing it out. But both states now have active state-level programs for their regulated utilities. All right, if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to go through a few things. I just want to note that a few states have the most community solar. So if you're in New York, you'll see here that across the country, New York has the 2nd most community solar by state to date. Although I'll show later that most of that is under the broader New York Sun program and not the Solar for All. And while New Jersey isn't on this list yet, it is an up and coming one, and I will show that in just a minute. But as you can see, New York already has quite a bit of community solar, which is great, and we expect more to come online. If we go to the next slide, what I'm showing here is that not only does New York have a lot, but it has a lot of in queue. So we say planned projects. And then you'll see unlike the last slide where New Jersey doesn't have as much, it only has 37 megawatts of current community solar. It has 150 megawatts of planned community solar. So we're excited that New Jersey has a newish program that's up and coming, and we're expecting more to grow out of that. And so we're looking forward to seeing New Jersey rise up the ranks of deployed community solar. All right, so if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to point out that there is a robust pipeline. This is kind of a continuation on that. It's more detailed, so you can see there's a lot more planned in New York. This is more of a reference slide you can look at and get the full data set. I'm going to go over it. I know I'm going through a lot of these quickly, but I'm happy to answer questions at the end. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to be showing New Jersey. Same thing here. Like you can see, New Jersey has had less deployment over time, but we have a lot planned as the new program was just passed this year. And then if we go to the next slide, I'm going to speak specifically to low and moderate income, right? So there's community solar legislation, and then there's additional legislation in some states specifically targeting low to moderate income households, which NCSP is a proponent of. And so as you can see here, New York and New Jersey, similarly, 17 of the 22 states have LMI carve-outs or specific programs through legislation. And I'm just going to talk quickly to what those look like. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that in capacity, this is a similar chart to what I was showing earlier, but this is specifically for projects in the LMI carve-outs. And so what you can see here is that we're very excited because New Jersey, of their actual projects, they have quite a bit. They're the second most planned projects. And New York has less planned projects, but already has some operational in their Solar for All program. So we're excited to see New Jersey growing, not just in community solar, but also in an LMI carve-out. Yeah, and if we go to the next slide, I think I'm coming to the end here. That's all I wanted to show in terms of slides. So I'm going to turn it back over to Abby, and we can take some questions, hopefully, and provide more answers.
All right, thanks, Matt and Simon. So like the slide says, please drop your questions into the chat. Or if you'd rather just say a question out loud, you can use the raise hand function, and we will call on you and you can just come off mute and ask your question that way. So to get started, we have a question, which is, what are some of the best policies or legislation in New York and New Jersey that have helped community solar growth and LMI carve out? So Simon's kind of leading off your last few slides. What is specific about those policies that really helped with that build out?
Yeah, certainly. So a few things. So the policies, there's many different ways policies can be supportive of community solar. Of course, having legislation that enables it, that allows it. In some states, there is not legislation, as you saw on the maps, and that can sometimes limit it because it doesn't allow for the sale of electricity between a third party and the customers, which means that you have to go through utility-owned projects. So in New York and New Jersey, that's not the case. So that's one thing that's helpful, is that developers can develop projects and sell to customers even if they are not the utility. And also, the way that New York and New Jersey support the projects is a little bit different, but they provide financial incentives. So in New Jersey's current program, the new program rolled out will pay the projects that develop, the companies that develop the projects get paid for part of the energy. So in addition to the subscription payment from the customer, in New Jersey, they get a $90 per megawatt hour payment, what's called an SREC, a solar renewable energy credit. And that SREC helps incentivize the projects to make them financially beneficial to the developer. And so that's a great way. We see that in other states as well, like DC does a similar thing, I believe. And so they get paid money on top of the subscription to help make those projects more economical. In New York, they do a slightly different model, I believe, but they also help. So for the Solar for All component, they are actually subsidizing the subscription cost. So if you qualify under Solar for All, you don't pay anything, but you still get the subscription benefit. So you're considered a subscriber, but it's a zero cost subscription with all the same benefits. And so that's because the state puts money into a pot to help pay that. So incentivizing through the legislation the actual projects to ensure that they are economically viable is always a great way to help reduce the barriers, along with some other factors like enabling consolidated billing so that the project developers' costs and credits are on the same utility bill rather than being on a separate bill. Like many other subscription services, if you think of a video platform like Netflix, you pay separately from your electricity bill, even though you're using it in the same place as your house. By having consolidated billing, which New York has, it means that you pay on the same bill And so you have one less bill to pay, and you can see there were credits on that same bill, which is a really helpful way to make it more accessible to customers to understand that. I don't know, Matt, did I miss anything that you think would be valuable to talk about or add? There's loads of things we could talk about.
Yeah, no, I think that covers it for now. I think some of these questions that I'm seeing in the chat, we might be able to cover a couple other areas that
Yeah,
may have been
so
applicable to that question.
yeah, I think seeing two questions that I think we could kind of lump together. So one, what are some of the largest barriers that are not regulation related that are preventing community solar adoption? So I'm guessing this question asker was asking about both getting subscribers and developing projects. But then we had a question about effective outreach, which I think could be kind of combined. The answer to that could be combined, kind of more a general discussion.
Yeah, that's where my mind went. I'll take the kind of consumer side, the solar subscriber adoption, Simon, if you want to go into kind of the project adoption. So I would highlight the issue of effective outreach to subscribers and ensuring that those doing the outreach and signing subscribers up are legitimate actors and are presenting accurate information. Well, not generally speaking, but we've heard from those developing projects that there's a lot of distrust, and some people that may be potential subscribers don't really believe the benefits that they'll be receiving, almost think that it's too good to be true. So it's important that, if possible, those doing the outreach to potential subscribers are reputable, are presenting accurate information, and if possible, have relationships with the communities that they're working in. I think that those are really important things to help ensure the success of community solar projects and ensure that the needs are being met by those who subscribe. Take it away, Simon.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And if I could only add one thing to that, it would be that working through existing routes to connect with customers is a fantastic way. I talked about the low income clean energy connector earlier, which is a tool that's meant to help facilitate that within states by connecting folks that are already in programs like LIHEAP with community solar, right? So if you already have a point of contact with someone, utilizing that database of someone, and you can use that same messaging route, can sometimes help reduce friction and ideally be a trusted avenue for communication. So just making a plug for that as is my prerogative, I guess. But from the developer side of things, there's always a host of things, right? I think a lot of folks are seeing interconnection be a problem. Even if the program is open, if you're developing a project, you have to get that project through all of the prerequisites for developing and interconnecting a project into the grid, regardless of if it's in a community solar program or a part of any other, any part of the grid. It has to go through those rules. And so the process of interconnection can be sometimes time consuming and can or cannot be costly depending upon where the project is located and certain things. So if you've never done solar development before, that's something to definitely be aware of. And so that's definitely, I would say, one of the largest barriers we see. And also just understanding the process, how to become an applicant into the community solar program and how to meet all the requirements. The state lays out the rules and requirements in their legislation about what you have to do to be a member of the programs, and then to work with the utility territory you're within to then get customers. So I think those are probably two of the bigger kind of administrative or technical concerns to be thinking about if you're doing project development.
Great. Well, I do want to make sure we don't miss the second part of Deborah's question, which is that this might be difficult, but both of you shared a lot of resources. What are kind of your top two that folks should really, you think will be most impactful or helpful that they should try and look at after this?
From both perspectives, I would say, from a technical and from a marketing perspective, I guess. Well, one cop out is that if you join NCSP, the Community Solar Partnership, one of the resources we have is a matrix of resources. And I plug this because it indirectly answers your question, which is it has a list of, I think, over 150 resources. And that's a lot of resources, but then each resource is categorized by a thing like marketing or program development or project finance. And then within those categories, if that resource is there, it's a check. And then we highlight with green the top 5 or 10 best resources that address those issues. So I'm plugging that because it somewhat indirectly answers the question by saying, if you go get that resource, you can find the best resources that you need for any topic you're in, whether it's technical or policy or administrative, that NCSP has collaborated. We've compiled this with Matt at CISA and with other organizations as well. So I'm going to plug that one. So if you haven't joined NCSP, please do. And that's under the resources on the NCSP website platform. I'm going to defer to Matt while I think a little more.
I'm going to use the exact same cop out because CISA, we put together a LMI community solar resource database, which I think Abby dropped in the chat earlier, which has dozens of resources and some specific to the question, to Deborah's question. So those are the resources that we've been able to identify after quite a bit of research and also working with Simon. And it's, again, specific to LMI community solar.
And just to add,
so
go ahead, Abby, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just say, I promise this isn't sponsored by NCSP, but it is really a great resource because in addition to like, once you're signed up, you will get notifications about funding opportunities, and that's how you can apply for technical assistance, but also there's a forum. So if you have a very specific question that's like, hey, I want to know about how mid-sized projects have dealt with interconnection issues, you can talk to other like people who are developing projects and get their experiences, and there's already been a lot of questions that folks have asked that you can sift through. So it is really helpful. I promise it's free to sign up. It's just a great resource that you can kind of get started on your community solar journey that way. So yeah, I'll just be a third vote for signing up for NCSP. Okay, so Simon, did you have anything to add before I cut you off?
No, I was just going to say, I think that one of the top few, it's kind of hard because it depends on what subject or issue you want to address. But within that matrix of resources, I also mentioned there is like a whole category called like Community Solar 101. So it gives very entry level like explainer documents as well. So if you're just learning what community solar is more and the considerations around it, there's also resources in there that you can go find. And that's a very helpful kicking off point if you're new to community solar.
Great. I'm going to pivot a little bit. We had a question, which is, what is the average net financial benefit for an individual community solar subscriber? So I think this could be answered a few ways. I think maybe we can do one that's, like a market rate subscription versus for a like an LMI subscription.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one from a DOE perspective, at least. So to answer that question, I'm going to send you, at least from the market rate perspective, to one of the tools, one of the data things we publish. So that data that I was showing at the end, all those slides with the data about the states, is part of what we have, a publication called Sharing the Sun. So NCSP publishes every year data on all 50 states and all the projects, as well as from the subscriber's perspective. So in that analysis, we have what we call a net present value from a subscriber's perspective. And it gives a range of savings and a kind of upper or lower range of savings across the nation on how much the net benefit of a subscription is. It varies, is what I will say, depending upon what state you're in, what utility you're in, what your rate is, right? Everyone pays a slightly different utility rate. But what we've seen, and I can speak to, is that NPV, that net present value for a subscriber, has become positive in the past number of years and remains positive for a good range. So meaning that almost all projects provide at least some level of savings to the consumer. Our NCSP goal is 20% at least. I think that varies a little bit. I think we see more in the closer to the range of like a 10% bill savings, give or take right now. 10 to 15% is more of what we're actually seeing across the market for market subscribers. In New York, for example, the Solar for All program provides a 100% return because you pay $0 down and you get a bill savings. So if you qualify as a low to moderate income customer in that case, you can expect significant savings because you get 100% of the savings with 0 of the cost. But for a market customer, it's probably closer to that 10-ish%. I don't have details on New York specifically or New Jersey, especially since New Jersey is just kind of rolling out and their pilot program was much smaller. But that's a good, I would go look at Sharing the Sun to start and kind of see what the range is across the country. Matt, is that, did I miss anything you're immediately thinking about? Okay. It looks like Abby might be frozen, which is not a problem. We'll carry on. All right, so let's see. That was from Lou. Matt dropped his link in there. I got a question here from Adam, which is, I'm sorry, yeah, 2 from Adam. One is a 301 level development template timeline in one document would be helpful. When you say a 301, Adam, do you mind clarifying? I know it's not a question, but just clarifying that in the chat for us. And we can probably answer the next question while you clarify that one. So New York defines LMI at 60 to 80%, or a 60-80 split, which to me is just low. I'm assuming that means 60, 80% of the AMI, or the average median income or area median income. Who defines this differently, federal, state level? Matt, do you have a good answer to that one? Or I can kind of throw an answer in there. Yeah, so
Yeah, no,
who defines it differently? The answer is everyone. Almost every single state and federal program out there has a slightly different set of rules. Maybe not every federal program, but most states in their legislation, to give an example, Oregon as a state, their community solar program is for low income only. It's not for moderate income, and they have their own definition of what what to use. Some use area AMI, so the median income. Some use a couple of different other ways of saying it in the poverty scale, like 200% below the income level. And so it really depends on what the goal of the state and the policy is in terms of who they would like to target. I guess I would make a push for, like I said earlier, aligning those with other programs such as LIHEAP or SNAP or et cetera, because that enables maybe consistent messaging. So trying to provide folks with an easy understanding of if they qualify and how to confirm if folks qualify if you're doing an LMI program, I think is an important way to reduce both administrative burden and an ease of messaging and marketing. But who defines this differently? The answer is a lot of people. Almost every state has a slightly different definition because of just how each state and each program, even utilities within the same state, sometimes may have a slightly different definition of who qualifies for those types of carve-outs. But of course, that only applies to LMI components, not for the general public who can apply to anything. Yes, okay. Abby, you're back. I'm gonna turn it back over to you. Yeah,
Great.
we just answered Adam's question and he clarified kind of a request as well, but I think that's more of a request that we can maybe respond to offline.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, y'all. My internet chose the worst possible time to randomly drop. So thanks for Simon for just ad-libbing while I was gone. So we did have a question, which is there a resource with data on savings? And I would direct that question asker to probably Sharing the Sun. Would be the best resource for that. So that is, again, one of the many links in Simon's slides that you can access through that. And that will have some information on savings for folks. And, feel free to continue putting questions in the chat, but I also did want to make sure we got to some of the questions that folks asked when they registered for this training. So one topic that we didn't really touch on is how community solar development can work as part of a community resilience hub. So Matt or Simon, I wonder if you could touch on that.
Go ahead, Matt. If you want to start, I can add more, or unless you want me to do it, but I've been talking a lot.
Abby, if it's appropriate, I would almost defer this back to you with all your work on resilience hubs. Or is that not appropriate?
Wow. No, that's fine. Yeah, so just to caveat on this, Clean Energy Group, we do a ton of work around resilience, particularly kind of energy resilience. So how you can use solar and typically battery storage to provide, backup power during outages, and also, potentially financial savings during kind of blue sky conditions. And so I'll say around community solar and resilience, it absolutely, those two things can work together. And I will plug actually, if you are considering any sort of resilience hub project and also want to consider community solar as part of that, we have a technical assistance fund that provides funds for pre-development analysis. So if you have, a facility or a site that you're interested in seeing if it could support a community solar array, or you have a community solar array and you want to figure out how a battery could work with that, you're welcome to apply, and I'll drop that link in the chat, and we can kind of get you sorted on figuring that out. I'll say we've worked with a few of the projects that we've worked with. We've seen examples, for example, like a school where they have a community solar array that then the households around the school are subscribed in, and they're actually now in the process of getting a battery as well, so that during an outage, the school can act as a resiliency hub and folks can go there to, charge their phones or just get information, or the school can also do things like have refrigerators so they can handle fresh food, or if folks need to refrigerate their medications or things like that. So yeah, I'll drop a link to our technical assistance fund in the chat, and all of the CEG's resources around resilience if folks are interested in that. Oh, Matt already dropped it in for me. So that's for putting me on the spot. I appreciate your help there, Matt. All right.
I would just add to that, Abby, actually, for example, DC, the Washington, DC itself has also their DC Department of Energy and the Environment has been working on that by combining it, and they've actually put out an RFP. So if you want to see an example of what that could look like, they haven't deployed them yet, but they're in the process. So peer learning, always pointing out other folks that are doing similar work on resilience, eco hubs, I think is what they're called in DC, and that they're working on combining that. And just, I think, to answer another question which was asked in the registration was, can non-residential folks be subscribers? In New York and New Jersey, yes. Most places the answer is yes. It does vary somewhat by program, but businesses can be subscribers as well. There's usually a limitation on how much you can subscribe to in terms of how the percentage of the actual project. So you can't subscribe to 100% of a solar project, because then it's really just your solar project. We'd like diversity, and most programs want to spread the wealth, so to speak. But if you do have a project like a school that is the host for an eco hub, they can oftentimes, and usually will be, a partial subscriber to that community solar project, maybe say taking 30% of it and the other 70% going to the local homes, like Abby was recognizing. So the answer is yes. Businesses, non-residential folks can definitely subscribe. And that can actually be a benefit sometimes to help, with development risk, et cetera. So.
All right, we have time for a few more questions, so it's not too late if you have a question you want to drop in the chat. Otherwise, I will just ask another one that was from the registration list. Matt or Simon, do you have any resources you would recommend specific to community ownership, community-owned solar, and developing a community-owned solar project?
There are resources in our LMI Community Solar resource database that are specific to community ownership. So I will find those and drop those in the chat right now. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I will find those and drop them in the chat. Again, community ownership is kind of an emerging area, particularly cooperative community ownership. So there's still a lot of things to be worked out there, but hopefully it expands in the coming years. We haven't really mentioned it, but but EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund's Solar for All program, those awards will be going to states, will be announced to states probably in March of next year. And there will be a lot of funding going to states around solar, LMI solar, and community solar. So community ownership may become more of a popular thing as that funding rolls out. But I will find those resources and drop them in the chat.
All right. And I see that there's another question in the chat that is a long one that I'm going to follow up with this person over email, because I do want to make sure if we just move to the last slide we have, if you want to scan the QR code or just visit the WEAC TCTAC, you know, we shared a lot today, but I know all of you probably have additional questions or are trying to figure out projects. So, you know, please do submit your questions through the technical assistance request form on that website. And I see Sarah just dropped that in the chat as well. And I want to say thank you so much to Simon and Matt for their time. And like I said, if you have other questions related to community solar, we are going to be following up with you by email, and we'll make sure that you get those responses some way, somehow. So thank you all so much. And then one last plug, this is our very first training. We are going to be sending around a survey link so that you can tell us how we did and what we can improve. Please, please, please fill out that survey because we want to make these as beneficial to everyone as possible. So, you know, no holds barred. I won't take it personally. We're trying to improve. So please do fill out that survey that we send out. All right. Thanks, everyone.